On my wedding day, I found my fiancée in an intimate embrace with her white moonlight, her first love, in the bridal suite. Her bridesmaid was deliberately stirring things up. Now that you have Felix, why bother marrying someone else, Nancy? Just get married right here and now. Felix smiled and pecked her on the corner of the mouth. Nancy, would you marry me? Surrounded by cheers and teasing, my fiancée blushed and lowered her head, looking shy. I pushed the door open with a smile, interrupting their scene. The guests are waiting. You two lovebirds, please come out. My appearance caused the boisterous room to fall silent. Everyone turned to look at me. The groom, corsage pinned to my chest, made my identity clear. Someone greeted me. The groom is here. I tore off the corsage and threw it to Felix, the white moonlight. Don't say that. Those two are such a perfect match, like a match made in heaven. Don't ruin their happiness. The bridesmaids looked awkward and fell silent. Sean. Nancy abruptly rose from the sofa and glared at me. What's gotten into you? We're just joking. Is that really necessary? Others chimed in, trying to smooth things over. Yeah, it's just a joke. Don't take it seriously. It's your big day. Don't fight, you two. Right. We woke up too early and our brains are still at home. I snorted. A joke? It looked pretty serious to me. My gaze swept over Felix, who was sitting with his legs crossed, my implication clear. Shut up, Nancy snapped. Felix is used to kissing in public in foreign countries. You're just a bumpkin who doesn't know anything, so stop talking nonsense. I looked at her, amused by her attempt to twist the blame. A kissing custom? I knew about kissing cheeks and kissing hands, but I'd never heard of a lip-kissing custom. In the 4 years we had been together, she would always push the blame onto me, no matter what the issue. Because I valued our relationship, I was always tolerant and would apologize to appease her. But this blatant betrayal was different. Her trick would not work on me anymore. I stepped aside, opening the doorway. Fine, I'm a bumpkin. So please, you and your sophisticated foreign man, go exchange your rings downstairs. The rings, the venue, the guests. Everything is ready and waiting. You two don't have to worry about a thing. Nancy was stunned, looking at me in disbelief. I added, considering the marriage certificate we got a month ago, you two should remember to come with me to the civil affairs office after the wedding to get a divorce. After saying all this, I felt strangely relieved. For the past 4 years, I had been carefully maintaining this relationship. Aside from work, I spent all my time trying to please her and her family. I was always smiling and accepting her and her family's criticisms. I thought that a long-lasting relationship would grow stronger with care and effort. I even thought that her constant picking at me was just her way of growing together. But from start to finish, it was only me who was getting more and more invested. For her, I was just a substitute she used for her amusement. I had always been a replaceable prop for her. I had finally seen the light 2 weeks ago. I was having dinner with a client, and after dinner, I glimpsed Nancy and her friends in a private room. Thinking it was a coincidence, I went to the counter to pay the bill. However, I overheard Nancy's friend's voice. You and Sean are married now. You should probably forget about your first love. My heart sank and I froze outside of the door. Nancy's excited voice rang out. So what? Sean can't even compare to Felix. Felix owns a company in a foreign country. He's mature, steady, handsome, and romantic. Sean hasn't even made manager in all these years. He's just a loser. Someone asked, but you used to say you were happy because Sean gave you his entire salary and handled all the housework. Are you really okay with that? Nancy scoffed. I admit he treats me well, but it's nothing compared to what Felix can offer. He's just like a pet dog to me. If I broke up with him, he'd probably pester me. Can you think of any way to get him to break up with me? My heart tightened, and my chest ached. My legs felt like lead. Then, her friends tried to dissuade her. You're already married to Sean, and your first love broke up with you and went abroad for so many years. He only came back last week. How can you be sure you will be happy with him? Nancy didn't listen, and she kept arguing. What do you know? Felix will make me happier than Sean. He is romantic and thoughtful. Compared to Sean's boring personality, He is so much better. We women don't want a useless man who just listens to us. We want someone with courage and strength to make our hearts flutter. If you don't help me, we're not friends." I was struck dumb. My heart felt like it was being ripped out. Last week, she started to treat me coldly, always being dismissive and angry for no reason. I thought it was because my grandmother was suddenly ill and I had to postpone the wedding. I tried my best to make her happy and promised to organize a bigger wedding. But it seemed that she hated me, so she couldn't have been looking forward to our wedding. She was just figuring out how to break up with me so that she could pave the way for her and her first love. 4 years of careful coddling was nothing compared to the fact that he was back. I rushed home, and for the first time, I drank alcohol. Before this, I had given up alcohol because I was going to have a baby. But now, I didn't have to anymore. When Nancy returned, she smelled the alcohol immediately. She frowned when she saw me drinking on the floor. "Sean, are you crazy? Weren't you the one who asked to try for a baby? Why are you drinking?" She already had her first love, so why was she still talking about having a baby? But I still didn't want to give up. I stared at her and said seriously, "Do you still want to have a baby with me?" Her face stiffened, her eyes darted away, and she was immediately filled with rage. "What are you doing now? Don't tell me you're taking your grandmother's illness out on me." Nancy left the room without a second glance. I sat on the floor for the whole night. The next morning, she left the house. I slowly moved my sore body. The bitterness filled my heart. From yesterday, she hadn't asked why I was drinking. The hospital called, telling me that my grandmother was in a critical condition. I rushed to the hospital. I tried to call Nancy, but she hung up on me. When I arrived, my grandmother was in the operating room. I signed the critical notice, but after the door closed, I fell onto the floor. My grandmother was my last living relative. I was terrified. The only person I wanted to see was Nancy. She was my wife and the anchor of my emotions. I called her again, and she picked up after 24 attempts. I was afraid, and my voice shook as I begged, "Nancy, my grandmother is critical. Can you come?" Nancy's voice sounded annoyed. "I forgot to tell you. My boss has sent me out on a business trip. I can't go now. Also, your grandmother has had so many critical moments, and she's always gotten better. I'm not a doctor. What's the point of me coming? I'm busy. Don't call me if it's not important." She hung up the phone. I didn't have any hope left. I thought she was on a business trip, but when I went to the pharmacy, I saw Nancy and another man coming out of the pet store. The girl was holding a cat while she was laughing with the man. The man's arm was around the girl's waist. My breath caught. It was my wife, Nancy, and her first love. I rushed to them. "Is this your unmissable business trip?" Nancy looked panicked, and she moved away from Felix. Felix looked at me. "You're Nancy's husband?" As a friend, she accompanied me to the vet with my cat. "Why are you making such a fuss?" "It's none of your business." I asked her angrily, "So, you didn't have time to come see my grandmother, but you had time to come see your first love's cat? Why are you shouting at Felix?" Nancy looked at me. "She is your grandmother, not mine. What do I care if she lives or dies? Don't you dare point fingers at me." My chest constricted. She had forgotten that my grandmother had been hit by a car while saving her. Looking at Nancy, it felt like I was seeing her for the first time. I was tired. I should reconsider my relationship. Let's take a break and calm down. I thought she would be happy because she had asked her friends to help her leave me. But she was furious. "How can you say that? I and Felix have nothing to hide." Nothing to hide? Would friends touch each other? I didn't want to argue. I left. Luckily, my grandmother was out of danger. She is in too much pain, so make sure you spend time with her. Don't make her angry, the doctor told me. I thanked the doctors and began to look after my grandmother. I called her grandmother. She held my hand. "Grandma's okay. You must be so scared." I was trying to hold it back, but I couldn't. Tears fell on the bedsheets. She patted my head. "You're already married, don't cry. You need to be with Nancy. Don't stay with me, an old woman. Also, you didn't have the wedding, so you made Nancy suffer. Be kind to her and organize a bigger one." I agreed to everything. I didn't let her notice anything. I thought Nancy would want a divorce soon, but instead, she was admitted to hospital. The doctor scolded me. Why would you bring a pregnant woman to surf? It's too dangerous. I was stunned. Pregnant? She's 3 months pregnant. Didn't you know? I was frozen. How is my wife? The doctor told me she was fine. I breathed a sigh of relief. A feeling of joy spread through me. A child. I was finally going to have a child. Nothing else mattered. I hugged my grandmother. Grandma, Nancy's pregnant. You're going to be a great-grandmother. She was excited. She even began to take her medicine. She laughed and told me, I will take care of myself to see my great-grandson. The doctor smiled and said that my grandmother was recovering. I went to see Nancy. Outside of her room, I heard Felix. Since you're having Sean's child, you should look after yourself. We shouldn't see each other anymore. I thought everything was going to be okay. But then her voice came. I don't want this child. The joy was drowned out by a bucket of water. My whole body was frozen. The doctor asked me, Are you the family member? Why don't you go in? He pushed the door open. Both of them turned to me. Nancy looked pale. Then she said, Why are you here? I ignored her words and put my things down. I took her hand. The doctor said that you were pregnant. My parents also know. They're on their way. Nancy, both me and my grandmother are excited for the baby. You are as well, right? I was like a rat. I was going to do anything to keep the child. I hated myself, but I couldn't think of any other way to make her keep the child. You told your parents? She frowned. Yes, I nodded. They were so happy when they heard the news. Did you think you could make her have a baby by bringing up her parents? Nancy doesn't want. Felix cut in. Felix. Nancy looked annoyed and told him, Don't you have work? Go. Felix left. I sat down and started to tell her what I had bought. I've asked the doctors and bought some things for pregnant women. There's also a new necklace that you like. Also, my grandmother is getting better. I want to organize a wedding before you get too big. That's enough, Sean. Nancy pulled away. I don't want the baby. You should tell everyone that there was a mistake. My mind was racing. My whole body was shaking. I grabbed her hand. But Nancy, it's not a mistake. The baby is 3 months old, and it is healthy. I can give you anything. I can do anything. Please, please, don't be so cruel to me and the child. She slapped me and said coldly, Sean, you can't control me. Why do you think I married you? Do you really think that I like you? If you didn't look like Felix, and if you didn't do everything I said, do you think I would want to be with a loser like you? You think you're worthy of having my children? I fell onto the floor. My heart ached. Her words were so painful. For years of my efforts were just a joke to her. My chest was in pain. I've never done anything wrong in the last 4 years. Nancy, please, consider the 4 years we've been together, or consider the fact that my grandmother saved your life. Keep the child. My grandmother is not well. She got better when she heard that you were pregnant. She will not survive the shock. Please, I beg you. I'll give you all my money and even my life. You? Nancy smirked, then said, I can keep this child, but you need to get a kidney transplant test. If we are compatible, I can think about it. Okay. Compared to my grandmother and my child's lives, 1 kidney wasn't much. Seeing that I had agreed, she didn't say anything. The results came back successful. Felix gave me a plane ticket. Go overseas to give my mother a kidney transplant. If you run away, Nancy's child will be gone. I grabbed the ticket and told him that I would keep the appointment. Before I left, I told my grandmother that I had to go overseas. She told me, You should take care of yourself. Be good to Nancy. Me and Nancy will be waiting for you. I kept my tears in and nodded. I didn't expect that I would miss my grandmother's last moment. When I woke up, my wounds were not too bad. I called Nancy. Luckily, she picked up. The surgery was successful. I did what you wanted, so you need to do what you promised. There was silence on the other end. I know. I smiled. Nancy, after your abortion, remember to use medicine and rest. I couldn't hear her clearly anymore. Abortion? Nancy revealed everything. Yes, I aborted the child. When you get back, we will get a divorce. My throat tightened, and I forced myself to speak. Why? Nancy, why did you lie to me? You promised that you would keep the child. You promised me. Nancy said, who would have thought you would believe me? I was lying to you the whole time, you idiot. She hung up. I was yelling. My wounds reopened and began to bleed. The doctors rushed to help. The doctor said to think of my family. I thought of my grandmother and stopped fighting. Just as the doctor was about to do the surgery, I received a call from my grandmother's doctor. I'm sorry, but your grandmother's heart failed. You need to come back as soon as possible. What are you talking about? I shouted. What happened to my grandmother? My grandmother's voice came, Sean, I know that you still remember your parents' unhappy marriage. That's why you are desperately trying to save your own marriage, but you're too tired. Sometimes, letting go is happiness. Grandma hopes you will be happy. Tears fell onto my hospital gown. Grandma, wait for me. I'm coming back soon. Grandma, wait for me. Don't hate anyone. Grandma is just going to see her daughter and husband. I'm happy to have you. No. Grandma, wait for me. I'll be back soon. I beg you, wait for me. Grandma, Grandma, talk to me. Grandma? I pulled out my intravenous drip and ran outside. The blood dripped onto the floor. My wounds had reopened, but I didn't care. The doctor was saying, Mr. Sean, your grandmother has passed away. Please accept my condolences. My legs were like lead. I tried to smile, but it was sad. How? I haven't gone home yet? My grandmother said that she would wait for me. Please accept our condolences. My phone fell onto the floor. I began to run. The doctors and nurses stopped me. The doctor tried to comfort me with my family. I looked at him and shook my head. I don't have anyone. My last relative is gone. I need to go home. Let me go. My grandmother is waiting for me. They gave me a sedative. I collapsed. I was taken back to the ward. I cried. This time, no one would wipe my tears or say that I was a cry baby. And no one would open their eyes to tell me everything was okay. My last thought was, I don't have a grandmother anymore. In the silent funeral hall, I knelt down and kowtowed to my grandmother. Grandmother, I'm back? A day ago, I had found out everything from the hospital CCTV. My grandmother had received a package. Inside, there were photos of me trying to make Nancy laugh, photos of Nancy with another man and her abortion papers. My grandmother collapsed. And the person who gave her all of this was Nancy. It was her who had given the sword to the murderer. My grandmother told me not to hate anyone, but I could still see my grandmother falling on the floor, in pain. How could I not hate her? I remembered the video I had posted before I came back. I won't listen to you this time, Grandma. My phone was vibrating. Nancy screamed at me. What's going on with those photos online? Do you know that I finally managed to win his mother over, and she was going to let me marry Felix? You ruined everything. I pretended to be surprised. What photos? You know that I just came back. What is it? I will help you. Nancy hung up. My search results showed a trending topic. Exposed. Overseas entrepreneur intervenes in a small employee's marriage, cheats with the wife and forces divorce. There were photos of Nancy and Felix, and photos of me being slapped by Nancy. Wealth, status, and cheating, everything was trending. The comments were all cursing. This woman is a slut. She's cheating and still so arrogant. That man is not good either, cheating with someone's wife. Gross. Someone exposed my history. I live in the same estate as the couple. The wife is known to be a bully. She makes her husband be available 24/7, and he will be made to kneel outside if he is late. She makes him peel the fruit by hand, and he can't even take a trip. She also doesn't let him do any social activities. He is actually a brilliant man, but he is still a small employee because of her. The accusations were shocking. In the past, these things were said by Nancy to show that she had trained a dog so that she could appear powerful. Now, the knife was pointed at her. More and more people were posting the photos that they had taken. Finally, someone couldn't sit still. Nancy called me in tears. Honey, people online are cursing me. I'm scared. Can you help me? I opened the email and paid a bit of money to someone. I asked, "How can I help you? Didn't you say you were going to give me a wedding? You should have a wedding, and tell the media that our relationship is good, that the rumors are fake." I smiled slowly. "Okay, I will definitely give you a grand and unforgettable wedding. You're the best." Nancy hung up. Did she think I was the Sean who was hurt when she cried, and did as she said? I uploaded the video and upgraded the hotel. After agreeing on a date, I filmed a video to announce the wedding. I also said that I would invite the media to witness our love. Under the video, everyone thought I was being threatened. I ignored them. On the day of the wedding, Nancy and her friends were upstairs. All the guests and the reporters were downstairs. The reporter couldn't wait. "Why are you organizing a wedding?" I spoke, "Because she wants me to remove the rumors and pretend that we love each other." The crowd gasped. "Pretend to love each other? So your wife is really cheating with Mr. Felix?" I looked at the screen. The answer is on the screen. The camera showed the screen. The video was full of the cheating. I began to speak. "This old lady is my grandmother. A year ago, she was hit by a car when she tried to save Nancy. 1 month after Nancy and I got married, Felix came back to the country. They started to contact each other. My grandmother was on the critical list, and on that same day, Nancy was with Felix's cat. Later, my grandmother was not well. Nancy was pregnant, which made her want to live, but she wanted to abort it. I had to beg her. I gave my kidney to Felix's mother, but after the operation, she aborted the child. They told my grandmother, who then passed away. I had just had an operation and I was overseas. I didn't even see my grandmother for the last time. I showed my chats, the CCTV footage, the recordings, and the paperwork. The guests were angry. Are they even human? They're worse than Jinlian and Qing. They cheated and took a kidney. Then they aborted the baby and killed the old lady. These two should be killed." A comment was shown on the screen, in bold. It was from Mr. May. "I was going to have a meeting with Felix in this hotel at 9 a.m. It's nearly 9. Is he going to see the bride?" The guests began to read out the comments. Nancy's mother stood up and shouted, "Impossible!" She ran to grab the remote and went to the CCTV footage. "All of this is Sean's lies. My daughter is a good person. She would never do this." The CCTV showed a man sneaking along the hallway, and Nancy and Felix were kissing at the door. Nancy's mother fell onto the floor. I finished up and went upstairs. I opened the door, and everything was revealed. Everyone looked at me, Nancy and Felix. Nancy told me, "Sean, what are you doing? Did you forget our plan?" I smiled. "Of course, but my plan is completed. I'm done playing with you." Someone said, "Look at the screen." Nancy and Felix looked and then looked away. They couldn't accept being stared at. They tried to hit me. The reporters filmed everything. The modern-day Jinlian and Qing caused a social media explosion. The police came and arrested Felix. Without Felix, Nancy ran away. The police traced the man who sent the photos. It was Felix. Felix's company was also closed. In the cafe, Mr. May gave me a thumbs up, "Thanks to you, or else I would have lost all my money." I smiled. "Thank you, Mr. May. It was great working with you." I was able to collect evidence overseas. Mr. May was a retired manager, so he was wise. At first, he had believed in Felix, but then he realized it was a scam. I booked a private room for Mr. May and Felix. Felix wanted to work with Mr. May, so he had agreed. As I walked out, a woman ran towards me. She was Nancy. I backed away. "We have nothing to do with each other from the moment you chose Felix. How can we not be related?" Nancy shouted, "I'm your wife. Then we should get a divorce." I tried to get her to my car, but she sat on the ground. She screamed, "I don't want a divorce. You loved me, didn't you? You said that you would forgive me. It was just a small mistake. Why do you want a divorce?" "Small mistake?" I laughed. "Is it a small mistake that you cheated with your first love and sent the photos to everyone? Is it a small mistake that you aborted my child? Is it a small mistake that you used my kidney? Is it a small mistake that you killed my grandmother? You aborted my child. You killed my grandmother. You nearly killed me. And you're saying these are small mistakes? How dare you?" Nancy tried to say, I didn't know about those things. I didn't want to hurt your grandmother. You are just using your words to defend yourself. I kicked her. Do you want me to forgive you? Then go through what I have gone through. If you can't, don't come near me. No. She grabbed my pants. People online are cursing me. My parents don't want me anymore. I only have you. Please, don't leave me. She was looking at me the same way I had looked at her. I used to beg her to keep the baby, to not be so cruel. But what did she do? She made me give my kidney and then got rid of the baby. I pulled her hair back and smiled at her. Your parents don't want you anymore. You must be tired. I'll take you home. Forget everything and we'll start again, okay? She looked at me and began to cry. Sean, I was wrong. I was so blind. I shouldn't have done that to you. I'll change, and we can start again. As she was crying, I pushed her away and sneered, You actually believed me? She looked at me. You lied to me? I looked down at her. Who would have thought you would believe me? I was lying to you the whole time, you idiot. How could you lie to me? Nancy screamed. I asked, Does that sound familiar? I asked her that when she aborted the baby. The light disappeared in her eyes. She screamed, I regret it. If she didn't see Felix or abort the baby, she would have a husband who listened to her, a kind grandmother, and a lovely child. Instead, she was a mess. Her family didn't want her, and her husband had left her. She had chosen this path herself. She should carry the consequences. I won't divorce you. I will be your wife for the rest of my life. There was a crash and screeching of tires. Someone shouted, There's a car crash. Someone died. That woman suddenly ran into the car. It's not my fault. A bloody ring flew in front of me. It fell into the drain. I didn't look back. I threw my ring into the bushes. The email for manager of Mr. May's company was in my inbox. From now on, I had a bright future. The end.